And what you have to be very careful about is, as the developer here says, the amount of downloads doesn't represent the amount of sales, because of course he, like many other developers, offer a trial version first before he purchases the actual product. So what happened after that? A couple of days later, or a day later, the Next Web offers a retraction of sorts, and they've got all that, and they take back some of what they said and clarify and still try to stand by the points that they were making originally. But it does highlight how you've got to be very careful with figures. I'm not suggesting that Next Web just created them out of thin air, but I would like to know where they got these figures from and who they're basing the facts of, because the person who has created the facts has obviously made a big mistake.
Yeah. Well, 70% of news is supposed to be originating in PR agencies based on some surveys they do now. And it's usually they work in pairs, so you have the so-called journalist, or the person who's actually the publisher, and you have the PR kind of holding their hands, because the PR revenue or power in terms of market value is like, I think it's at least an order of magnitude higher. It's maybe like, 50 times higher, because the journalists don't get paid much, but the PR agents actually are being paid by the companies being covered. Okay, so if you're a journalist, you usually won't be paid by the company like Microsoft, but the PR agent will be paid very generously by the company, and then the PR agent's job is to try and push some stories, and that's a quick story with the journalists. And
one of the things, I was just going to say, one of the things that did disturb me though, this is Jeff Weber. He's the developer of this Crashlander application / game. And one of the things that disturbed me about his comment when he replied to this article was, my sales are probably more like 3,000 since the launch in late October. Why doesn't he know? It's his application. Maybe somebody can what sales are. Surely there must be some method of recording this and how many people have actually purchased this full game.
In that case, it might be something like Microsoft only release like figures every month or every 2 months or something like that, and he's having to try and extrapolate. Yeah. That could be the reason for that, you know?
Yeah.
But you see, he ends it with since launch in late October, which suggests to me from that particular comment that he doesn't know since the launch. So my sales are probably more like 3,000 since the launch in late October, which doesn't suggest he's had any sort of regular update at all. I could be wrong, but maybe I'm reading into something that isn't there. Interestingly enough, though, there was another comment made by the Next Web on the same article, and it was they made a comment about Fruit Ninja. Again, I don't know what this is. I'm assuming it's a game.
I played it before.
Right.
It's really don't try and play that.
Well, it says Fruit Ninja has grossed $150,000 on Windows Phone 7 and under $20,000 on Android. The app on Windows Phone 7 sold more units at 3 times the price. Make that what you will. And somebody's come back on and challenged that particular figure as well by saying Fruit Ninja was downloaded from 100,000 to 500,000 times on Android. If we want to be conservative, it made at least $99,000. Don't know where you got the $20,000 from. Again, it's these sort of fudged figures that get blasted at people, and most people wouldn't give a second thought.
Yeah, and they choose data points. They choose just one application, or they make it kind of a case study or a story. Forget about statistics in general. Let's just pick one story, one developer. Let's kind of change the numbers and see how we can kind of shape them in a way that it looks kind of good. And we put it in a story, and that's what they do. Though it's kind of like a documentary. That's all worked in general.
We'll stay on figures because Microsoft seems to like its figures and making claims. Very interesting little fact here. People might remember the Humble Indie Bundle, which saw Linux users donating a lot of money to the developers for a very good package of games or suite of games.
I'm not sure its donation is the right word. It
was a donation in that there was no set fee and that people could decide how much it was worth.
But then it's not a donation. It's more like a fee. That's. I think they don't really want to use the word donation because that implies you kind of like being just generous for trying to throw some nickel to the developers. And what they actually try and do is to show you that you can develop a business model where people basically pay them based on what they want to pay the person, and it's not really a donation based thing.
Well, I look at it more as the generosity of the end user was an indicator of how good the package was, and that to show the appreciation of that package and how well received it was by the end user, they donated or transferred, if you will, however much money they did. But regardless of whether the finer points of that,
It's
you might remember.
It's Radiohead model. It's the same model of which Radiohead was trying
It was
about
very
3 years
successful.
ago.
Yeah,
It was,
very
yeah.
It's staying on that topic though. We're looking at the game Oil Rush. Now, it's not a game that I'm familiar with. I haven't really read about what the game's about. I assume it's some sort of sim type game revolving around oil drilling. But the game Oil Rush has been released, and the pre-sales figures, I beg your pardon, have been released, and it's again showing that Linux users are responsible for far more purchases than Windows. Last time I checked, it was about 90% of the 900 buys were Linux users, and about 10% Windows. So that again shows a nice little figure. It could mean many things. It could mean that there's more Linux users willing to pay for decent software than there is Windows users. It could mean Oil Rush is competing on a bigger market because on Windows there's more proprietary binaries native to Windows, so of course it could mean that. But it was nice to see that the Linux is being represented and the Linux users are interested in purchasing these type of titles, because I think
there is a very simple explanation though. This game has been promoted mostly in Phoronix since the early days because of the game engine. The game engine is very advanced and it works well in Linux. And this group, which I think has some elements, mostly like in Russia or something, they have been developing this game as a kind of a demonstration of why I should use their engine. Mm-hmm. And this game is, I'm not sure if it's kind of semi-educational or kind of like Sims or whatever. So what happened is all the forums in Phoronix and people who really look forward to good games and good graphics and maybe, I don't think it has ray tracing or anything, but it's people who look forward to something really, really advanced, which has Linux on par with all the other platforms, have been following this game. They were going for the pre-sales based on the fact that it was advertised in places like Phoronix. And if you look at the numbers of the number of people who bought the pre-sales, we're talking about, maybe, if I recall correctly, it was like hundreds or maybe less than 100 so far, or?
Yeah, I think there was a comment made about the pre-sales being disappointing. I don't know what disappointing pre-sales would be, and I don't have any stats from previous titles that have been released that have the pre-sale figures shown as well. So I really don't know. But I mean, the main point me bringing it up really was more to challenge the comment that's often made by Microsoft advocates when they're talking to Linux users, and that Linux users often get labelled as people that don't want to pay for software. Want everything for free, want everything handed to them on the plate, and it's far from the truth, the reality. Linux users, I think, are just like any other user, very happy to pay if the software is fit for purpose and it's good quality software. I think. Sorry, Gordon.
Well, I was just waiting there. There was a similar article on, I believe it's TechBytes this week, by the makers of Minecraft. They had said, well, piracy's high, but it doesn't really matter because we're happy with the fact that lots of people are playing it and lots of people are paying to play it, and that people actually want to buy it. And he's saying that that for indie developers, Linux is definitely the way to go because Linux users are starved of good quality games. They're ignored by all the major studios. Like EA won't even look at Linux. Steam won't look at Linux. All the major players ignore Linux. So there's a huge market out there for Linux users who are desperate for good games, and they will pay for them. They absolutely will pay for them. Even a sort of throwaway comment, I don't think he really means this as an insult, but one of his comments was, just throw something out. Linux users will pay for it. They'll buy anything because they're so starved, and it's like a market that's ripe to be tapped into, and that's just getting completely ignored.
Well, staying on the subject of Linux, unless Roy, and I'm sorry, Roy, I seem to be hijacking the show a little bit. And I'll tell you why, because I've got a new section on the site, and it's basically this week. It's a summary of everything that's happened over the week for me and what's taken my interest and what I've been up to online. And I've summarised it already with an article which I'll be publishing after TechBytes is released. So I've got another Linux article, and then I'll pass it over to Gordon or yourself just to mention anything else you want to mention. But it's this project, which I'm going to bring up now, has been very important to me over the last few years. In fact, even when I was a Windows user, I believe I was using it on that as well. Android's set to get the SETI at Home project. The Android marketplace is set to get the SETI at Home application in order to search for extraterrestrials on your mobile phone. Now, for those not don't know about what this project is, it's not something to be